What's your stupid 21st century watered down fortune cookie say, Dad?
You will have with your mother.
I cannot keep defending this show, bro. They really have us out here in the trenches. Rick and Morty fans, this is a dark time. I don't even want to recommend this show to anyone. I don't even know if I can. Just the thought of like some sweet extended family member being like, I want to get into adult animation, grandson. What should I watch? I would have said Rick and Morty maybe at one point, but the thought of them just turning on this episode and this being the first thing they see, I mean, absolutely not. At this point, if I'm out in public and you ask me if I know what Rick and Morty is, I'm gonna say no. Even if you show me all these videos I've hosted, I'm gonna have amnesia. I'm gonna go full Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and be like, I have no recollection of that show at all. That's weird. And if you're wondering why I'm having this reaction, I don't think you saw this week's episode. Now look, okay, let me scale it back a little bit. How do I word this? I'm not gonna say this was like a bad episode of the show. Like, honestly, it was really entertaining and had some of my favorite like sci-fi plot elements of the show so far. But there's one glaring plot point that ended up being like the main crux of the episode. I think you know what I'm talking about. And I kind of want to talk about how I'm feeling about the show in regards to this direction they seem to be moving in. To me, it feels like Rick and Morty has become a show that wants to shock you more than anything. And you can feel it now more than ever in this week's episode specifically. Because the fortune cookie angle was objectively some of the coolest stuff the show has ever shown, but I can't help but feel like it was undercut by what the writers really wanted to focus on, which was Jerry being prophesized to, I'm just gonna let him say it.
Have sex with your mother.
Now look, as always, I like to start with the basic rundown of the episode, just to catch everybody up, and like I said before, this is one of the coolest sci-fi concepts that I think the show has done in a while, at least one of the most interesting ones. The episode opens with them at Panda Express, a classic Rick and Morty move now at this point, I guess. And the core of this episode, the whole point of this episode, basically being Jerry gets a fortune that turns out to be real, and then Rick and Jerry have to go on this crazy expedition to infiltrate the world of fortune cookies, leading to them ultimately finding out that fortune cookies are this insane tool used by the rich elite to control fate. And even weirder that it's all just because of like an alien that like
Stripping randomness from space-time and leaving behind super dense pockets of energy that bend entropy towards definable outcomes.
I believe it. There's so much to love here, and I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. But why? Why was the fortune for Jerry to...
Come on and fuck already!
I get being weird and dark with it, okay? And they could have kept it here, man. They could have just made the weird out-of-pocket joke. We'd all like awkwardly chuckle and they could have moved on from it. But no, the show keeps doubling down. And yeah, there's something extremely hilarious about like fate bringing this insane situation together. Like Jerry's mom randomly calling and randomly wanting to visit. Like the early part of the episode, it was so funny to see because you're like, there's no way they're actually going to do this. And nobody actually believes Jerry, Rick included, until he does some sci-fi measurements, some tests, which again are really crude. Like if it was any other situation, I feel like this would be like a really fun sequence, but because it is what it is, and he has to like decide which hole in the box, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Before we move on, there is a few things I want to mention that were interesting in this episode. There was some continuity. They mentioned Sleepy Gary, which I enjoyed. Reminds me of a better time. Oh, also, Rick's old ship is back after the old one blew up last episode, thanks to the Creepy Night family. And I hope this isn't like permanent and he somehow gets his new ship back, because that would just be a really weird status quo change to only have for like 4 episodes before just getting rid of it entirely. All of these little moves, space bath, Rick's new ship, it feels like this show's maturing in a way, so it'd be kind of sad if they just went back to the old ship after all of that. It's like, what was the point? Maybe it's so they can sell it as like an action figure. Maybe this is just a whole merch thing. I wouldn't put it past the show, and I'm not even mad. Like, make your money. I don't care. Anyways, back to this episode specifically, I do want to highlight a few more things that I think really worked for it before I get into my issues. I love a Rick and Jerry episode. I do. I love these two together. I think it was funny that he was dressed as Morty for a second. Even the gag there in the context of the episode made me laugh.
Why are you dressed like Morty?
Because Morty's mom is Beth.
I'm not unpacking that.
I love the slow escalation. Like the pacing was great. Going back to the Panda Express, then discovering the corporation. Even the plot is just so funny, smart, sharp. Rick and Morty. I love the Gwyneth Paltrow parody. I'm like 99% sure that's supposed to be her. And most importantly, I love seeing Rick get so excited about discovering this. I think the power scaling in the show has been so weird since like the season 3 premiere. Seeing Rick get humbled and like put back in his place has made the show a lot more interesting. The show basically painted Rick as a god, and now that he's not anymore, it makes me want to root for him like way more. Like even the fact that he discovered this and immediately wants to conquer the fortune cookie's power shows that he is already not in control of fate, even though like part of my mind thought he just kind of could do anything. I also love the fact that if you don't complete your fortune, you're just effectively immortal. Like this is some good sci-fi. Like this reminds me of like the Mr. Meeseeks days. It's awesome. And the fact that Rick wants this power to be immortal reveals that he's not immortal, which I guess they never said he was, but there was that episode where he died and like it showed his whole protocol for basically staying alive forever. So I just assumed he was pretty much immortal, but it dawned on me in this episode because of what Evil Morty did, that whole plan is sabotage. Like it no longer works. If Rick dies right now, unless he's got another trick up his sleeve, that could be it, which is scary considering he's facing his like deadliest threat ever, that threat being Rick Prime. So yeah, it just puts him and the rest of the family in a super interesting place and kind of raises the stakes. The best part of the episode by far, besides the old man who controls the fortune cookies, was the fight scene at the end. Seeing him fight with those fortune cookies and like all of the guards use their fortune cookie powers, I had to go and rewatch it like 4 times because there's so many jokes, it's like a mile a minute, and they all land, like they're all just so out of the box and hilarious. Like the soldier that only shoots headshots, to which Rick immediately uses him as just a weapon. It's some pretty creative stuff, I can't lie. And finally, I love that they just gave this plot line like the entire episode instead of going back and forth between like an A and a B plot, especially because the B plot is literally just them going to the zoo with Space Beth. So halfway through the episode, when I realized that they weren't gonna cut back and this is it made me appreciate the fact that Rick and Morty can do A and B plot episodes but also just sole A plot episodes. But all of that being said, that's about where my love for this episode ends. Because if I'm being honest, I was not a fan of the threat of the episode being the looming threat of Jerry
Doing it with your mom.
Look, I think it's funny that the old man was trapped there and started sending like SOS fortunes, and then eventually when nobody listened, he just started putting that in there. Like that is a funny explanation, I can't lie. But I gotta call this show out for a second. Look, Rick and Morty has always been weird, okay? I mean, season 1 had the Mr. Jellybean scene. Like it's always been insanely out of pocket, and it always walked that line. I'm not gonna lie. It's a weird show. Look at the pilot it came from. This is some weird source material, and the fact that they turned this into one of the most profitable and commercially successful animated projects of the last decade is mind-blowing. And that's why I want to circle back to the merch stuff. I don't think anybody could have predicted how big Rick and Morty got, and I think that it took them a couple of seasons to kind of adjust to that and just figure out what they wanted to do with the show. I don't think the show ever wasn't genuine, but I think it just had to adjust to the weird power it had. Like when you make a weird one-off reference to a McDonald's sauce and then you get people riding in a McDonald's, I cannot imagine the feeling in that writer's room. And I think Rick and Morty is a show that is just always trying to shock us, unapologetically so. And these last 2 seasons have given us some of the most shocking moments so far. But I'm just gonna say it, they gotta chill it with the incest stuff. What is this? And I'm not calling it out on a one-off, okay? I'm not against edgy humor. I'm not a little snowflake, okay? I can take a joke. I can laugh at some messed up stuff. But once is enough, Rick and Morty. Once is enough. You already canonically have an incest baby in space. You already did an episode with the anthropomorphized sperm war, where Morty befriends his own sperm and then impregnates his sister. That's the episode that aired on television. I feel like I should go to jail for saying that out loud. You already crossed some lines, bro, and we all looked past it, okay? You named it Naruto, and we had to just smile and nod because we wanted to see that evil Morty, and you kind of suck because you did it. You gave it to us. These lore-heavy episodes have been so fulfilling as fans. It's been so great to see the show actually building up to something, delivering on everything it's been setting up. These have been some of the best episodes of the show. So why, for the love of God, are we having to sit through all of these incest plot lines? You did a whole episode about Beth hooking up with herself. Give us a second to breathe. Oh my God, I can't watch the show with anybody. I have to watch it alone because I'm so freaked out about what the episode's gonna be. I can't comfortably watch this show in a room with other people, and it feels just as weird to watch it alone. I get dark humor, and I applaud you for still going with it. It's cool that the show is staying true to itself, that it never tried to be anything it wasn't. I can confidently say, in its many season run, Rick and Morty has never not been itself. It's always been unapologetically itself. It's cool, even if that's really weird sometimes. But I feel like there's a line maybe before you just start alienating your audience. As weird as the plotline is, it could have ended there, and this could have just been a funny episode with that weird part that we all just kind of sat through. But you showed us it. There was the scene. You know what I'm talking about if you've seen this episode. The final scene where Rick saves Jerry just in like a second before disaster, that we had to look at this image of him naked and ugh, that's tattooed in my brain. You've poisoned my brain. This is not just me. There are memes about this now. I see TikToks about this. We are all baffled at the amount of incest humor that the show has recently featured. I feel like this is a situation where it's like 3 strikes you're out. I don't know how much more of this I can handle. This is like strike 2.5. I understand that they may want to shock the audience, that they still may want to be like out of pocket sometimes, because honestly, only Rick and Morty can. They can feasibly do pretty much whatever they want with this show, okay? It's just gonna make a ton of money. It's just so successful at this point. It's so big, and it's animated, so like just realistically, they can show a lot more than what you can do in a live action format, including stuff like this. But that doesn't mean you should. At a certain point, you have to acknowledge you're up in the Target t-shirt section, okay? You gotta play the game a little bit. I'm not saying dumb down the show or make it any less weird. As a fan, I would just be happier if they refrained from going in this direction so strangely often. Okay, that wraps up my little rant. And honestly, I'd love to hear from you guys about this. How do you feel about this episode? Is this too far for you, or do you think it's just funny? Am I just lame? I might be. I guess I just wanted to address the point that I feel like Rick and Morty has gone in this direction where it just tries to shock the audience or be really weird, and it always has. But now that the show has such a rich lore, now that we're in such an interesting part of the series, and the show has done such a great job of just re-establishing the core cast, their dynamic, the power scaling, I would, as a fan, prefer if they just leaned into that a little bit more, as opposed to being as shocking and out of pocket as possible. Because my jaw was unhinged this episode, and not in a good way. But at the end of the day, these are just my thoughts. Rick and Morty is still going to be exactly what Rick and Morty is going to be. What I say doesn't matter, and honestly, I'm going to keep watching this season. But I just had some really specific thoughts on this episode that I wanted to share with you guys. And like I said, please let me know what you think, because I'm honestly interested. What does the fanbase, what does the community think of all this? At the very least, I think we can all agree the fortune cookie powers were dope, Rick and Jerry episodes are peak, and that Jerry's suit transformation was really funny. That's going to be all for this video, guys. As always, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay in the loop with all things animation. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Roundtable Vids, or me on Twitter at It'sRetroNemo. As always, I'm Nemo, this is a Rick and Morty breakdown, and I'll see you next time. Peace.